Have you ever gotten to the command phase and thought, man, how am I going to delete that pesky Demon Prince? How am I going to crack that Toughness 9 Rhino? Or how am I going to avoid getting into melee with those 3-wound Sanguinary Guard, 8-bound Blade Guard, what have you? Well, that is why the God Emperor in his infinite wisdom invented the Predator Destructor. For with his 3 damage, rapid-fire 2 autocannons, double las cannons, and hunter-killer missile, he can really be quite a problem solver. And that is the subject of today's review. Today I will be reviewing this proxy model that I purchased on Temu, which can be used very well as a Predator Destructor if you play Warhammer 40k. So this model cost me about €7.66, so that's about $8.99 or £6.73 for my UK viewers. And it took about 11 days to arrive, which was a bit over the expected shipping timeline. So I did also receive a €5 discount. I might have mentioned it before, if you do order around Christmas time, the shipping times do tend to take a lot longer because, well, people are just, all the post offices are kind of overwhelmed with all the orders. So you're more likely to get that €5 discount voucher from Temu, just something to be aware of. But without further ado, let's get into this review. All right, so now I'm going to talk about what you get in the box and the various weapon options that you have here. So obviously you get the Predator Destructor autocannon on the turret, and for the sponsons, you only really get these 2 heavy bolters. Now, some people like to run heavy bolters for their Predator sponsons. I typically like to run las cannons, so it's kind of a shame that you don't have the las cannon option here. I think that's typically the more competitive way to run it. But obviously, if you would want to run some las cannons, you could buy some bits, or alternatively, you could also purchase this Leman Russ Proxy for about €6 or €7. I think I purchased it for about €7. I've seen it for under €6 on Temu, and this actually comes with 3 las cannons. And notoriously, you can actually run the Leman Russ with las cannons. So you could just take the las cannons off of this one, put them onto the sponsons in there. You'd have to cut them off and kind of magnetize them, but I don't think it would be that difficult. And the great thing is, if you take this out, you could then just use your heavy bolter for the Leman Russ. If you are an enthusiast of Space Marine armies and Astra Militarum or Trader Guard, we don't discriminate here. All right, other than that, you would typically also have a Storm Bolter on your Predator Destructor. You don't get one of those here, but you do kind of get like a nice little pintle mount point right there. So if you wanted to kind of kit bash a Storm Bolter out of some Space Marine bolters, you could kind of take maybe a paper clip, cut it off, and stick it onto there. However, I have also found another option, which, since I know that I'm not going to be using my heavy bolters, I just kind of pasted one onto the hull here. So if you do want to proxy one of your heavy bolters as a Storm Bolter, you can kind of just cut it diagonally right across there, and just paste it on. And then, you know, from the Leman Russ, you would get the las cannons, you would have a Storm Bolter up here, and then you could just kit bash a Hunter Killer and stick it up here. I do have a video on how to kit bash your own Hunter Killer. Yeah, and then you would have all the options available. All right, so now let's talk about the printing quality and detail regarding this model. This is an FDM print, so you're not going to really have to worry about that toxic sort of resin that you get with some prints when you're kind of kit bashing or scraping things off of this model, which is quite good. But you will have these little FDM print lines. I do have to say they're very fine on this one. You can hardly see them from afar. The ones on the Chimera proxy that I presented in a different video were definitely a lot thicker. So overall, it's a very, very clean print. You do get sort of these little hairs that you have to pull off at times. But overall, it's a very clean print, but attention to detail, you can see it's not that detailed, this model. The GW model definitely has a lot more detail. You can see these tank treads down here are a lot more detailed. But for €7 or what have you, you can't really complain. You can see back here, you kind of have this circle here. Maybe you could mount a Hunter Killer on there. You can also see over here, you kind of have some printing inconsistencies. I don't really mind that too much. You could scrape it off, but I think I'll probably pretend that it's sort of like the alien code from whatever Forge world this was printed on, maybe. They communicate in lines, I guess, over there. But yeah, you can see sort of these printing lines there, but very common for these kind of Temu proxies. Overall, though, quite a clean print in my experience. All right, guys, so let's briefly talk assembly. So this proxy model, as with most other Temu proxies, has this clip system. You just kind of clip these guys in. And I do have the experience with this one that they don't really wiggle at all. I've had some Temu proxy models where they wiggle, but even if they do wiggle, eventually once you clip everything together, they're always totally solid. And as you can see, you don't really need to leave the treads off for painting purposes. At least that's my opinion, because the treads are already quite separated from the main hull. So you'll be able to paint those quite easily, even if these side pieces are attached to the hull. So assembly can really be done in like a minute. It's a lot simpler than building a GW model. Just make sure that, it's pointing the right way and that you have the lights up here. These sponsons, you don't even really need to magnetize these heavy bolters because they fit into the sponsons quite well and quite tightly. So they kind of just clip in. I have put that one upside down, unfortunately. I have found with one of the heavy bolters I bought for my Predators that I had to shave it down a little bit, but this one just fits in perfectly like that. And then these just go into this hole here, the sponsons. Sometimes you have to push it a bit. Sometimes it feels like it doesn't fit in the hole, but it's just very tight, I'm not sure how well that's going to work long term. You're probably going to have some paint chipping here eventually because you're going to be turning it around. But you could just magnetize it and go that route. But as you can see, it's very, very easy to assemble this bad boy. This turret here has a smaller little clip that you just kind of push in there. And one thing that's very cool about this turret that I like is that you actually have a lot of space in here, which means that you can put 2 magnets in there. And that way, when you're transporting this in your carrying case, this isn't just going to slide off or fall off. You can see that on my other proxy, I've done that. And it worked quite well just with some putty. So, yeah, definitely full points in terms of assembly. Very simple. Works very, very well. Okay, guys, so I'm going to touch on the scale and dimensions of the GW model versus the Temu Proxy model. So, full disclosure, this model right here is only partially a GW model. It is a GW Rhino chassis with GW las cannons, but I did proxy the turret up here, so that is not exactly accurate. But I did look up all the dimensions for you guys that the GW model would have. I just wanted to have it there as a rough size comparison. So the GW model is about 12.2 centimeters long, or about 4.8 inches. And the Proxy model is exactly the same length, basically exactly the same length. Maybe it's a millimeter or two off. So that's very, very nice. The main discrepancy we have is the width when you count in the sponsons. So the hull width of the GW model is about 7.2 centimeters or 2.83 inches. And the Proxy model across, not including the sponsons, just the hull width is about 7.4 centimeters or 2.9 inches, so almost identical to the GW model. However, the GW model, including the sponsons, is about 10 centimeters across, or 3.94 inches, whereas the Temu model, unfortunately, is a full 11.7 centimeters across, or 4.6 inches. So that's 1.7 centimeters more for the Proxy model than the GW model, which you definitely notice if you compare them both from the top. So you can see the Proxy model is definitely significantly bigger than the GW model. Now, there are a couple ways around this. You could maybe clip, you see these come out like this. You could maybe clip this down a bit and make it a little bit smaller. And if you did just take these off and just hard glue, you know, you'd maybe have to drill a hole up here or just cut this off, just kind of hard glue them on, then you would get to about 10 centimeters across, so that it would be comparable to the GW model. Yeah, so you can see there, if you just kind of hard glued these sponsons onto the hull, you would get to about the dimensions, about 10 centimeters across, that the GW model has. But obviously it's a bit unfortunate that they made it like this. If they hadn't made this just a bit wider, it would really be the perfect Proxy. But other than that, they're almost identical. But finally, regarding the height of these models, the GW model is about 4.9 centimeters high. That's just the hull. So the hull is just about 4.9 centimeters high, or 1.93 inches. And the Temu Proxy model is about 4.7 centimeters high, or 1.85 inches. So just about 2 millimeters difference there. But in total, up to the turret, the Temu Proxy is about 6.7 centimeters or 2.64 inches high, and the GW model is about 6.8 centimeters or 2.68 inches high. So that's like that's 1 millimeter of difference. So really, really good there in terms of height. The only significant discrepancy you have really is obviously the sponson width. All right, guys, so now I'm just going to touch on the sort of overall look and aesthetics of the model. In my opinion, this model kind of gets like a 6.5 or 7 out of 10 in terms of detail. It's a pretty plain model. It's not winning any prizes for painting competitions or sort of 3D design competitions, but it definitely is in terms of accuracy. I mean, in terms of accuracy, it's definitely at like an 8.5 or 9 out of 10. I think if you ran this on the tabletop and looked at it from afar, you wouldn't really be able to distinguish it very well from a GW Predator Destructor. So, I mean, in terms of sort of overall look, for me, this is definitely a real catch. Okay, guys, so what is my verdict, man? I think that this is a solid 8 out of 10. The issue with the sponson width is a real bummer. I think at a tournament, I would just kind of ask for clearance before running it. The width is kind of usually going to be a disadvantage for you yourself, not really for your opponent typically, in terms of your Predator kind of clearing terrain. But you could argue that a wider hull can also disadvantage your opponent in terms of kind of move blocking. But again, these Predators typically aren't going to do too much move blocking because they're usually kind of at the back of the map, leveraging sort of their long range. I guess if you were running a ball Predator, it could be more of an issue. But overall, with all the weapon options you get and being able to add the las cannons from the Lehman Russ, You can get a Predator Destructor with all the weapon options you need for like 14 euros. And everything is pretty much identical except for the sponson width, which if you're really concerned about it, you can just clip it down and hard glue them to the hull, and then you're basically at the same sponson width as the GW Predator. So, I mean, I would definitely purchase this again. In fact, I definitely have already. I've got 3 of these bad boys, and I really look forward to running all Predators for my shooting. In some of my future Blood Angels lists, there's going to be an experimentation phase, but I'll be sure to post that on the channel. Okay, guys, if you did enjoy this video and you like this kind of content, do consider liking and subscribing. And if you've had experiences with this proxy model before, do let everyone know in the comment section below. And I hope to see you guys in a future video.